All right. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I wanted to look at a particular topic in biology. But for us to clearly understand this topic, we first need to understand what an organism is. Okay, so an organism is simply anything that has life. Or you could say anything that could do other metabolic activities that we'll talk about. Okay, so anything having life is regarded to be an organism. Wow, that's great. So we are organisms, but an organism can be classified to be living or simply just non-living. Alright, so a living organism is an organism that has life in simple terms, while a non-living organism is simply something that does not have life. But us distinguishing the two using life itself is not clearly enough. So what I want us to understand is that in biology, we have what we call life processes. Now, these life processes are sometimes referred to be as the characteristics of living organisms. When we say characteristics of living organisms, we're talking about the characteristics that a living organism has that allows it to be regarded as living. But we cannot just be calling them the characteristics of living organisms, but to break it down, we just refer them to be life processes. Now, these life processes will help us distinguish an organism to either be living or non-living. So I wanted to look at some of the examples of life processes that we have in biology so we can clearly understand if an organism is living or non-living. Alright, so we have 7 life processes, but we'll begin with the first one, which is movement. Okay, so movement sometimes can be referred to as locomotion. Alright, but these two do not actually mean the same. Now, locomotion means movement, but movement doesn't really mean locomotion. I know it's a bit crazy. Okay, so locomotion means movement, but movement does not mean locomotion. In the sense that movement talks about the ability that an organism has to move part or simply parts of its whole body from one particular position to another. Okay? The ability that an organism has to move part or parts of its whole body from one position to another. That, my friends, is what we're calling movement. But locomotion just simply means movement. I know this can just mean almost the same thing, but you clearly understand the time we'll be looking at locomotion as an whole entire topic, that it's different from just what particular movement can just be. Okay, so other than movement or locomotion, we have what we call reproduction. Alright, so reproduction is the ability that a living organism has to produce offsprings of its own kind. What I mean by its own kind is that a human being cannot conceive a monkey, and neither can a monkey conceive a human being. But organisms will produce offsprings that can be sometimes referred to as progenies of their own kind through simply reproduction. Though this reproduction is in two types, we have sexual and asexual reproduction. We'll look at the types the time we'll be looking at reproduction as a whole general topic. Other than reproduction, we have what we call sensitivity. Now, sensitivity can sometimes be referred to just as irritability. Sensitivity is the ability of a living organism to respond to stimuli. Now, stimuli is plural for just stimulus. And stimulus is simply a factor that will cause a response. And a response is an action that can take place in a living organism as a result of stimuli. So sensitivity or irritability is simply the ability that a living organism has to respond to stimuli. That is the same reason why you will always remove your fingertip from a hot plate when you feel the sensation of the heat. Moving away from sensitivity, we have growth. Growth is defined to be the permanent increase in size, mass, number of cells, and simply the complexity, of a living organism. So growth is a permanent increase in size, mass, number of cells, and the complexity of a living organism. All right. Number 5 is respiration. Respiration is defined to be the breaking down of food to release energy. And energy is our enablement to do work. I will explain all these life processes in details as we look at them as major topics in biology. But be mindful that respiration is simply the breaking down of food to release energy. Let's move away from respiration. Alright, other than respiration, we have what we call excretion. So excretion is defined to be the removal of toxic substances or waste of metabolism from the body through excretory organs such as the skin. So excretion will allow us to remove toxic materials, harmful substances, waste of metabolism out of our body through certain organs that are regarded to be excretory organs. And as a result, it helps us to be healthy in life. Alright, number 7, which is actually the last life process, is nutrition. Now, nutrition is also regarded to be feeding. So, feeding or nutrition is the ability that an organism has to obtain food nutrients from food substances. The ability that an organism has to obtain food nutrients from food substances is simply what? Nutrition. So food substances could be of so many variety. but nutrients are simply anything that if you take inside the body will give you, for instance, energy. So nutrition is something that will allow you to obtain these nutrients from particular food substances. Alright, so now with what has been said, we can clearly understand that if we classify an organism to be living or non-living, then we can clearly say that a living organism is that can move, reproduce, grow, respire, excrete, and feed. So a living organism is simply an organism that can move, that can reproduce, that can grow, that can respire, that can excrete, and finally that can feed. But a non-living organism is simply an organism that cannot move, that cannot reproduce, that cannot grow, that cannot respire, that cannot excrete, that cannot feed. So if you are taught to differentiate living things from non-living things, or living organisms from non-living organisms, so simply say living organisms can move while non-living organisms cannot move. Living organisms can reproduce while non-living organisms cannot reproduce. Living organisms can simply grow while non-living organisms cannot grow. It continues just like that. So thank you for watching this video. Let's have a quick recap of what I have said. Just a quick recap, a very quick one. All right. Life processes, characteristics of living organisms. Living organisms can reproduce, can grow, can respire, can excrete, can feed, nutrition, or simply just move. Now, examiners would base questions out of the characteristics of living organisms. For instance, they could say photosynthesis is one of the processes that will involve a plant making its own food. What characteristics of a living organism is this? Now, plants are making their own food. This through photosynthesis. Now, making their own food just simply helps them to obtain nutrients that are needed for proper health of the particular plant. So the characteristics that denote photosynthesis is simply nutrition, which is simply feeding. They could also ask you other questions that would be involving movement and the like. So the key is just simply understanding these life processes. If at all that you feel like forgetting, you can always use the shorthand system, which is Mrs. Grain. Now, Mrs. Grain stands for M, which is movement. Okay, R, reproduction, which is being capable of reproducing. S, sensitivity. G, growth. The other R for respiration. E for excretion. N for nutrition. All right, thank you for watching this video. I believe you have understood a lot. My name is Mr. Hussein. For more information, you can contact 0761 754349, or you can just simply come at Cashford Tuition Center. Or you can just simply follow our YouTube channel, which is Cashford Academy. Thank you for watching.